Taran Velik looked like an ordinary man, quiet, composed, and trusted by his neighbors. Naira Elwyn, his girlfriend, was a beloved preschool teacher, and their 2-year-old daughter Lena was the heart of their small home in Elmridge. But behind closed doors, Taran was unraveling. What began as silent resentment turned into a deadly obsession. And when Naira decided to leave him for good, Taran made a choice so cold, so calculated, it would shock the entire town. He didn't just want to erase her. He wanted to rewrite the ending. What he never expected was how quickly his lies would collapse, and how far justice would go to expose the truth. Taran Velik had always been good at pretending. On the surface, his life looked steady and normal. He worked at a local auto shop in the quiet town of Elmridge and was known as a reliable, quiet man who kept to himself. He didn't have many friends, but those who knew him said he was focused and hardworking. His girlfriend, Naira Elwyn, was a preschool teacher who everyone loved. She was kind, warm, and endlessly patient, especially with her 2-year-old daughter, Lena. Together, the three of them lived in a small but cozy house on the corner of Willow Street. To the neighbors, they were just another young family trying to build a future. But behind the walls of that house, a much darker reality was taking shape. Taran had moved in with Naira about a year after they started dating. She had always been the more stable one, emotionally and financially. Naira supported Taran when he got laid off from his previous job, helped him land his current one at the garage, and even took care of Lena without ever pushing him to act like a father. She gave him space to grow, trusted him, and believed in his potential. But what Naira didn't know was that Taran had secrets, dangerous ones. Taran had developed a gambling habit that started small but grew out of control. Late nights spent betting on underground sports matches, online poker games, and even shady backroom deals had left him drowning in debt. He owed money to people who didn't forgive easily. His bank account was empty, his credit cards maxed out, and he had already taken money from Naira without telling her. He justified it by promising himself he'd pay her back when he won big. But that win never came. With the pressure mounting, Taran's behavior began to change. He became more irritable, withdrawn, and suspicious. He started monitoring Naira's phone calls and checking her messages. He convinced himself that she was seeing someone else or planning to leave him. The reality, however, was much simpler. Naira had been offered a job in another state. It was a better position with higher pay, and she had quietly been considering taking it to give Lena a better future. She hadn't told Taran yet because she wasn't sure if she wanted him to come along. That uncertainty became the tipping point for Taran. The idea of Naira leaving, with Lena, the house, and everything he had grown used to, sent him into a spiral. He began watching her more closely, listening in on her calls, checking her emails. He found a message from her sister about the potential move and felt a cold wave of fear run through him. He told himself that if Naira left, his life would fall apart. He would lose everything, including the one person who still believed in him. Instead of asking questions or confronting his fears, Taran began planning. He started locking the shed out back, keeping tools hidden. He purchased cleaning supplies in bulk, telling Naira they were for spring cleaning. She didn't question it. She never suspected anything. She believed Taran was just going through a rough patch, unaware that he was slowly preparing for something sinister. To anyone looking in, Taran seemed like a man trying to hold his life together. But on the inside, he was unraveling. The thought of being abandoned, exposed, and forgotten twisted into something violent. He didn't see Naira as someone to love anymore. He saw her as a threat. And Lena, an innocent toddler who adored him, was no longer a child in his eyes, but part of the problem. The mask of a loving partner and father figure was beginning to crack. And beneath it, something far more dangerous was waiting to be unleashed. It started with a missed call. Naira Elwin's supervisor at the preschool tried to reach her around 8 a.m. when she failed to show up for work without notice. That was unlike her. Naira was known for being dependable, always arriving early, always prepared. When she didn't respond by mid-morning, the staff began to worry. Messages went unanswered. By noon, her closest friend, Mina, who also worked at the school, decided to check in. She called repeatedly, left voicemails, even drove by Naira's house. The car was parked in the driveway, but no one answered the door. Something felt wrong. Later that evening, Mina contacted the local police and filed a missing persons report. Within hours, officers arrived at Naira's house. The porch light was still on, and the rain from earlier in the day left wet streaks across the windows. The front door was locked, but there were no signs of forced entry. Taryn answered the door, looking tired and irritated, not alarmed. He told officers that Naira had taken Lena and left the previous night after they had a disagreement. He said she needed time to think, and that she'd done this once before. Disappeared for a day or two, then came back. But this time, he admitted, she hadn't called. Inside the house, nothing seemed amiss at first glance. The living room was tidy, with Lena's toys scattered just as a child would leave them. Her favorite stuffed rabbit lay on the couch. In the bedroom, Naira's phone sat on the charger and her purse was gone. The officers noted that her car was still in the driveway, which didn't line up with Taryn's story. If she had taken Lena and left, why would she leave behind her phone? And transportation? Despite the suspicions, there wasn't enough evidence to arrest or detain Taryn. He agreed to let them search the house, but became visibly uncomfortable when they spent too much time in the laundry room and basement. Officers noted his behavior. In their report, his detached tone, his avoidance of eye contact, his oddly calm demeanor. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, no forced entry, nothing concrete. Naira and Lena had simply vanished. As the investigation unfolded, Taryn stuck to his version of the story. He told friends and neighbors that Naira was dealing with emotional stuff and probably just needed a break. But those close to her didn't buy it. Naira wouldn't leave without telling someone. She wouldn't leave without Lena's special blanket. She wouldn't leave without her car. And she would never leave her phone behind, especially not when she had a job interview coming up. Everything pointed to something much more serious. The community began to get involved. Flyers with Naira and Lena's faces were posted around town. Candlelight vigils were held. Local news picked up the story, urging anyone with information to come forward. Tips came in, but none led anywhere. Surveillance cameras in the neighborhood were reviewed, but bad weather had obscured most of the footage. One camera, across the street, captured a shadowy figure loading something into a vehicle late at night, but it was too blurry to confirm who it was or what they were carrying. Police continued to press Taryn with questions, but he remained composed, rehearsed even. He talked in circles, repeated himself, and kept insisting that Naira would return any day now. He even offered to help in the search, though he never actually joined any of the volunteer teams. He stayed home, kept working, and kept to himself. But behind closed doors, Taryn was unraveling. Surveillance footage, receipts, and inconsistencies in his timeline were slowly catching up to him. Investigators were growing more suspicious by the day. They began digging deeper into his financial records, his phone logs, and his movements the night Naira disappeared. What they uncovered would lead them to a chilling discovery no one in Elmridge could have imagined. 3 weeks had passed since Naira Elwin and her 2-year-old daughter Lena vanished without a trace. The town of Elmridge was gripped by unease, and the pressure on local authorities was growing by the day. Investigators were working around the clock, combing through every possible lead, but something wasn't adding up. Taryn Velick's version of events remained unchanged. He claimed Naira had walked out with Lena after an argument, yet all the physical evidence suggested otherwise. Her car, phone, and daily essentials remained at home. And then came the surveillance footage that turned the entire case upside down. Detectives had obtained video from a gas station located just outside of town. It was time-stamped at 2:47 a.m., roughly 12 hours after Naira was last seen alive. The footage showed a man matching Taryn's description pulling up in a rented cargo van. The van was registered under a false name, but the rental agency's records showed it had been picked up by a man using a fake ID. Still, security cameras captured Taryn's face clearly. In the video, he was seen dragging several large black plastic bags from the back of the van and tossing them into a dumpster behind the building. He stayed for less than 10 minutes before driving away into the night. The discovery was enough to secure a search warrant. Investigators traced the rental van's GPS history, which led them to a local self-storage facility on the edge of town, tucked behind an abandoned shopping center. It was a quiet, poorly lit place that rarely saw any traffic. The records revealed Taryn had rented a unit 2 days before Naira disappeared. He paid in cash and used an alias. Staff at the storage facility didn't recognize him from his ID, but once investigators opened the unit, there was no mistaking the truth. Inside, beneath a pile of discarded furniture and broken boxes, were 2 bodies wrapped tightly in layers of plastic and duct tape. The smell was overwhelming, even through the thick wrapping. Forensics later confirmed the worst fears. It was Naira and her daughter Lena. Both had been dead for days. Naira's neck showed signs of strangulation, while Lena's cause of death was determined to be smothering. The positioning of the bodies suggested they were placed with disturbing care. Lena had been laid beside her mother, as if Taryn wanted to preserve the image of a sleeping child. The horror of the scene shook even the most seasoned investigators. Among the items found in the storage unit was a small notebook. Initially overlooked, it became one of the most damning pieces of evidence. The notebook belonged to Taryn. Inside were handwritten pages filled with chaotic thoughts, lists, and what appeared to be a plan. There were dates, times, and notes, like cover carpet, dispose separately, and act confused. It was clear Taryn had not acted in a moment of passion. He had planned everything, right down to the smallest detail. Forensic experts matched fibers from the black bags and plastic wrap to supplies purchased at a local hardware store. Security footage confirmed Taryn had visited the store days before the murder. Even more telling, tiny fragments of carpet found in the plastic matched a sample from the laundry room in Naira's home, a room Taryn had suspiciously insisted remain off-limits during the initial search. Investigators returned to the house with another warrant. This time, they removed sections of the floor, pulled out drains, and inspected vents. In the laundry room, under the washer, they found traces of Naira's blood. The pieces were finally coming together. What had seemed like a sudden disappearance was now revealed to be a calculated double homicide. Taryn believed he had hidden everything well enough to escape suspicion. He never expected the van's GPS to be tracked. He never thought the camera outside the gas station would be clear enough to identify him. And he certainly never imagined the notebook he carelessly left behind would become the very thing that tied everything together. The illusion of innocence was gone, replaced by a growing mountain of evidence pointing squarely to murder. The notebook found in the storage unit quickly became the centerpiece of the investigation. It wasn't just a collection of thoughts. It was a blueprint for murder. Each page exposed the unraveling mind of Taryn Vellick, who saw his world slipping away and chose violence to reclaim control. Investigators pored over every word. It contained detailed steps, including what time to commit the act, how to clean up afterward, where to hide the bodies, and what to say if questioned. One chilling entry read, "They'll believe she left. I'll play the part. Calm, concerned, helpful." Taryn had rehearsed every lie. He wasn't acting out of rage. He was executing a plan. As detectives revisited the case with fresh eyes, the pattern became clear. Taryn had built an image of himself as a calm, steady man, but the truth was far darker. In his personal life, he was drowning in debt, paranoid, and emotionally unstable. His gambling addiction had worsened, and he had taken thousands of dollars from Nira without her knowledge. Her discovery of his lies and the upcoming job offer out of state may have triggered his descent into calculated murder. But even then, it was more than panic. It was pride, ego, and obsession with control that drove him to kill. The more investigators uncovered, the more obvious it became that Taryn thought he could outsmart everyone. He had used gloves, wiped surfaces, and even washed the laundry room floor with bleach. He kept his answers consistent, never straying from the lie that Nira had left on her own. He even deleted texts and wiped search history from his phone. But his overconfidence became his downfall. One overlooked mistake after another was catching up with him: the receipt from the hardware store, the van rental under a fake ID, and most of all, his handwritten journal, where he recorded everything, thinking it would never be found. When police confronted Taryn with the evidence, his mask finally slipped. He refused to speak. He asked for a lawyer and shut down completely. But by that point, the silence no longer mattered. They had everything they needed. Forensic teams confirmed that the plastic wrap used on the bodies matched rolls found in his garage. Trace amounts of Nira's blood were discovered in his car's trunk. GPS data from his phone placed him at the storage unit the same night the security footage captured him with the van. His alibi collapsed, and his carefully constructed lies fell apart. News of the discovery spread fast. The Elmridge community, once hopeful that Nira and Lena would be found alive, was now reeling from the reality. Candlelight vigils turned into memorials. The preschool where Nira worked held a tribute in her honor, and dozens of families who knew her wept for the little girl who never got a chance to grow up. Neighbors who once smiled at Taryn across the fence now looked back in horror, wondering how they never saw the monster living next door. Prosecutors built a rock-solid case. The notebook was entered into evidence, along with digital records, forensic reports, and surveillance footage. Experts were brought in to analyze Taryn's behavior and establish the premeditated nature of the crime. The journal alone proved intent. He didn't just want to hurt Nira. He wanted to erase her, to remove every obstacle in his way. Even Lena, a child who saw him as a father figure, became expendable in his eyes. There was no plea deal offered. The state pushed for the maximum penalty. The double homicide, one of them a child, made this case especially heinous. Taryn Velik was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, unlawful concealment of a body, and tampering with evidence. He was denied bail and placed in solitary confinement while awaiting trial. The story that began with a missing person call had now become one of the most disturbing crimes in the town's history, and the man who thought he could fool everyone was now facing justice he could no longer escape. The courtroom was silent as the trial of Taryn Velik began. The seats were filled with a mixture of grieving family members, local reporters, and stunned residents of Elmridge. The case had captured statewide attention, not only because of the brutality involved, but also because of the chilling precision with which it had been planned. Taryn walked into the courtroom in a gray prison uniform, expressionless. He showed no emotion as the charges were read aloud: 2 counts of first-degree murder, unlawful disposal of human remains, and obstruction of justice. The evidence against him was overwhelming, but he refused to plead guilty. He still believed he could create doubt, even in the face of near-certain conviction. The prosecution wasted no time laying out their case. Over the course of the trial, they painted a picture of a man whose desperation and ego had driven him to murder. They showed the jury Taryn's notebook, reading aloud his disturbing entries. The gas station footage was played on the courtroom monitors. The jury watched in silence as the video showed Taryn hauling heavy black bags and throwing them away under the cover of darkness. They were told about the rental van, the fake ID, the timeline inconsistencies, and the GPS data that placed Taryn at every critical location. The digital trail was airtight. One of the most powerful moments came when forensic experts described the condition in which Naira and Lena's bodies were found. The room fell heavy with emotion as the medical examiner spoke of the effort it took to carefully wrap the remains, indicating clear, conscious action. Naira had likely struggled, and her injuries confirmed a prolonged attack. Lena, on the other hand, had no such injuries. Her death had been quiet, smothered, without warning. It was a method chosen not out of mercy, but to avoid noise. That detail shocked the jury more than anything else. The defense tried to argue that Taryn had suffered a mental breakdown, claiming diminished responsibility due to psychological stress, gambling addiction, and emotional instability. They suggested the killings were spontaneous and not premeditated. But the journal, with its detailed entries and organized timeline, undercut that argument completely. The jury wasn't looking at a man who lost control. They were looking at someone who calculated every step, from cleaning products to cover stories. Family members of Naira testified, their voices cracking under the weight of loss. Her sister spoke about the job opportunity Naira had been so excited about and how she had been planning to move for a fresh start. That dream was never realized. Teachers and parents from the preschool shared stories of Lena's laughter and bright personality, now silenced forever. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The impact of Taryn's actions rippled far beyond the crime itself. After weeks of testimony, evidence, and emotional weight, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty on all counts. The judge, acknowledging the brutal nature of the crime, handed down the maximum sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Taryn didn't react. He stood still as the sentence was read, unblinking, almost hollow. The man who once thought he could lie his way through murder was now facing a life in a cage, forever branded by his cruelty. As the courtroom emptied, there was a strange stillness in the air. Justice had been served, but no sentence could bring Naira or Lena back. Their absence would always be felt. At birthday parties that would never happen, holidays forever missing a child's laughter, and a sister who would always remember the phone call that never came. Elmridge would move on, slowly, but not without scars. The story of Naira and Lena Elwin would remain a solemn reminder of how evil can hide in plain sight, and how one man's delusion of control destroyed two innocent lives.